very shortly. All right. All right. Good day again, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. Again, if you've just came into the room, this session is on promoting responsible and climate-smart investments in agriculture in Southeast Asia through the multi-stakeholder approaches. We will begin in a minute. All our panelists is here, and we welcome our colleagues from the different regions and organizations, especially in ASEAN. Welcome. Good evening to all of us here in Southeast Asia. All right. I think we will begin on time for today's session. Thanks again for joining. This side event is part of the 50th session of the Committee on World Food Security, CFS 50, happening this week. And in today's session, we will get to talk about investments in food, agriculture, and forestry sectors in the ASEAN, specifically on the implementation efforts of the ASEAN guidelines in promoting responsible and climate-smart investments. The ASEAN guidelines in promoting responsible investments in food, agriculture, and forestry represents the first regional iteration of the Committee on World Food Security's principles for responsible investments in the agriculture and food systems. These principles are being streamlined among the various sessions this week and during the global thematic events right after this session. We are very fortunate today to have with us representatives from the ASEAN Secretariat, ASEAN member states, the private sector, and the civil society to share their experiences in responsible and climate-smart investments. And this side session is co-organized by the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, FAO, Grow Asia, International Institute for Sustainable Development, and the Global Alliance for Climate-Smart Agriculture. All right. Now, before we officially begin, realize there is a bit of housekeeping video shown earlier, but if you've missed that, you've seen some spots here and there, I'd like to walk you through today's agenda and reminders as well for some housekeeping. Allow me to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see it in a presentation mode. Awesome. Great. Oh, let me go back a few slides up. Apologies for that. Yep. All right. And today's session, we will start off with a key message from the ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations Secretariat, followed by a scene setting for this session. And next is a panel discussion. As mentioned earlier, we have representatives from the ASEAN member states, the private sector, and civil society. And we will then open the floor to questions from the audience. So feel free to leave your questions on the chat. And finally, we will end with a brief closing statement and key messages for this session. Right. Some ground rules. No, not ground rules, but just a bit of housekeeping. You know this by now. We're all in Zoom for the last 3 years, but please rename yourself in the format you see on the screen. That is name and your organization in parentheses. These is so we can address you properly during this session. Right. And keep yourselves on mute unless you're acknowledged to speak during the open forum after the panel discussion. You can use your raise hand function to raise a virtual hand when you want to speak, but please note that we will get to be acknowledged during the open forum later on after the panel discussion. If you are having technical issues, you don't know where the buttons are, you can also send a private message to Maria Baral from IASD. Maria, give them a thumbs up or send a chat message so they know who you are. If you can't access the participants list, then you can see her in the chat. Thank you. And this session has also a French interpretation option. So just click that globe sphere button down below to shift from English, which you'll hear me, and shift to French. And this session, as you've noticed, is being recorded so that the purposes of sharing the highlights, discussions, and learnings that we will have here today. Right? I'll stop here. Great. Now, before we move to the first part of the session, I'd like also to ask everyone to open their cameras. Let's take some quick photos to show how many people are here in this session today. Let's do that very quickly, page by page. All right, open up your cameras. You'll have to smile for quite some time because we'll need to take a lot of pages for this one. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, smile. All right, next page. Smile. Hold on. Let's make sure we got all of that. I'm in page 3, by the way. So 2 more to go. Oh, wow. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces as well by page. Welcome, everyone. Show those pearly whites while we take a picture. And final page, smile. If you haven't opened your camera, up, too late. No, I'm kidding. All right, great. Thanks everyone for opening your cameras. And now I see some familiar faces indeed and organizations here in the room. All right, before that, let's do a quick poll as well to know those that we're not so familiar with at the moment. Sean, thank you so much. So we'd want to know what type of organization you represent today. As we've mentioned earlier, this session is on multi-stakeholders. So we want to see if we are well represented as well for this session. Right. If you can't see the poll, don't worry. I will read the question, what type of organization you represent, and the choices are civil society, government, private sector, multilateral organization, and others. If you don't belong to those and you're in others, just put it in the chat. And if you can't access the poll, you can slip on the chat box as well for your answers. Great. We're at a good percentage, I think, almost 80% of people are still tuned in. So that's good. All right. All right. Thanks, Sean, for sharing the results. So I see we have a good mix of representatives today. All right. Right. Now we've officially start with the first part of this session to introduce that the implementation of regional guidelines is made possible through the coordination and support of the ASEAN Secretariat by sharing recommendation and outcome to the ASEAN Technical Working Group on Research and Development. And I would like to welcome Pak Dian Sukmajaya, a senior officer of the ASEAN Secretariat, to share his opening remarks. Over to you, Pak Dian.
Thank you very much, Krisa. Good evening and good morning, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dian, Senior Official in Food, Agriculture and Forestry, Sectoral Development Directorate, ASEAN Economic Community Department of the ASEAN Secretariat. On behalf of Head of Food, Agriculture and Forestry Division, Dr. Pham Quang Min, of the ASEAN Secretariat, I would like to express sincerely gratitude to the organizer to invite the ASEAN Secretariat to this event of the Committee World Food Security on promoting responsible climate-smart investment in agriculture in Southeast Asia through multi-stakeholder approach. Indeed, it is a great pleasure for me, also for the ASEAN Secretariat, to be part of this dialogue. As you may be aware, ASEAN has put food security on top of priority for regional cooperation, and promoting responsible investment is also our priority. At this important event, I would like to emphasize the current guidance from the ASEAN Ministers on Agriculture and Forestry on priority cooperation in the food, agriculture, and forestry sectors that include promoting sustainable and circular agriculture. The second is promoting to reduce harmful chemical use in agriculture sectors, promoting nature-based solutions in agriculture and forestry, and also for climate action. The fourth is addressing the carbonization effort, of which the ASEAN is now facilitating dialogue to develop the ASEAN strategy for carbon neutrality. And last but not least, to enhance the use of digital application technology for agriculture and forestry sector. On that priority areas, the ASEAN Secretariat has been tasked to engage with partners in mobilizing resources for successful implementation and timely delivery of the activities. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, in this good occasion, I also would like to highlight some regional policy framework that are important to strengthen food security in the region. Among others, the Vision and Strategic Plan for ASEAN Cooperation in Forestry, and then the ASEAN Integrated Food Security and its Implementation Plan, the ASEAN Multi-Sectoral Framework on Climate Change, Agriculture and Forestry toward Food Security. Based on those broad framework, the ASEAN has been developing relevant policies and reference for ASEAN member states, such as the ASEAN Guideline for Promoting Responsible Investment, of which this has become one topic we are going to discuss. And then the ASEAN Guideline framework in promoting climate-smart agriculture, we have already developed from volume 1 to volume 3. And then the ASEAN Public-Private Regional Framework for Technology Development in Food, Agriculture, and Forestry sectors. Those policy frameworks have been an important references and guides ASEAN member states in enhancing resilience to the adverse impact of climate change. Those frameworks, as you may be aware, were developed in partnership and also with support with our technical dialogue partners, such as Switzerland through the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, and also Germany through some projects such as the ASEAN-Swiss Partnership on Social, Forestry, and Climate Change from Switzerland, GACSA, Climate Smart Land Use, and Agri-Trade. We are also delighted and recognized technical support from our partners from Grow Asia, IISD, Climate Resilient Network, GACSA, and also FAO. I think, apology if I miss to mention, but more partners are engaged with our dialogue in ASEAN in promoting climate smart agriculture, as well as promoting responsible investment in ASEAN. Ladies and gentlemen, currently our sectors, with support with the EU through e-Ready program and GAZ through the Agri-Trade project, is also working on study related to decarbonization in food, agriculture, and forestry sector. I do hope that the side event also could open the discussion on this area, because it's also related to the responsible investment when we touch upon the carbon neutrality areas. Study on decarbonization of the ASEAN agri and forestry sectors supported by GIZ, and also the decarbonization dialogue, policy dialogue supported by the e-Ready. We also continue exercise with the alignment of the ASEAN guidelines for responsible investment in some countries. I do really hope that Indonesia could share with us on the progress of this exercise with the support of IISD and also with our partners from Grow Asia. We invite more partners to engage with ASEAN in those priority areas that becomes priority as guided by the ASEAN leaders on sustainable and circular agriculture, promoting nature-based solution, decarbonization, and reduce harmful chemical in agricultural sector. Again, thank you to all partners, to all organizers that invite the ASEAN Secretariat to this very important side event. I could not mention one by one, but I believe that with the strong partnership, we are going toward the right direction. We believe that in the near future, we could engage more robust partnership with all partners and private sectors. With that, I would like to thank to all participants and also organizers, and I'm delighted to open this side event formally. Thank you very much. Back to you, Krisa.
Thank you so much, Patzian, for opening that up for us. There are a lot of great priorities under the ASEAN already that was mentioned, and some of it will be reflected as well in today's discussion. We have nature-based solution, climate action, digitalization, and decarbonization, to just name a few of that. Now, to set the scene for today's session and really park some important questions and also challenges that we wanted to address with us is Ms. Dada Bacudo from the ASEAN Climate Resilient Network and GACSA to set the scene for today's session. Over to you, Dada.
Thank you very much, Borj. And can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay. Let me just pull out my, and thank you very much, Pak Dian, for some of the reminders, especially on decarbonization, that I know both of us will be embarking on. So as we all know, this is my pleasure as part of ASEAN Climate Resilience Network and GACSA to set some of the scene and to introduce why we are doing and why we are promoting responsible and climate smart investments. As we all know, agriculture plays an important role in the economy of the countries of Southeast Asia. Yet, member states of ASEAN are highly vulnerable to adverse climate impacts and irresponsible or unsustainable practices. However, various innovative and practical agriculture solutions have already been piloted, such as agro-advisories, participatory community-based approaches, technology-based farm information, and financial management technologies in support of transformative changes in the food systems, contributing directly to the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. So amidst this backdrop, we make the case that increasing responsible and climate smart investment in food, agriculture, and forestry is very crucial to continue sustainable development within our region. It might be not familiar to us, the ASEAN region attracts billions of dollars of investment in the food, agriculture, and forestry sector every year. And it is vital that the region continues to attract such investments, given that the sector's importance is very high as a driver of employment, poverty alleviation, and food security in the region. It will be very easy to say, let's continue attracting such investments. But we all know that there are many environmental, social, and governance risks and challenges associated with continuously attracting such investments. Moreover, there are so many barriers to scaling up innovative, sustainable, and climate-smart investments. This include, and I would like to mention some of the barriers, risk and burden to farmers in adopting new sustainable, climate resilient, and low emission practices. There's also fragmented planning and monitoring of field level measures. And there's also the low capacity to actually access finance and leverage private sector engagement. So within this rationale, countries in the region, ASEAN member states have called for further collaboration to address these barriers in the hope of continuously generating positive socioeconomic and environmental impacts, such as improved food security and nutrition, better protected ecosystems, and more sustainable use of natural resources. And we believe that responsible and climate-smart investments will be able to address that, so that we can address the impacts of climate change and that we continue to respect human rights and the rights of local communities. So therefore, in support of Pak Dian's opening, ASEAN, through several of its technical working groups, have developed guidance on how to promote responsible investments in agriculture, such as the ASEAN Responsible Investments for Agriculture Guideline, how to promote climate-smart agricultural practices, as Pak Dian mentioned, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and even the lesser talk about guidelines to attract public-private partnership for technology in the FAF sector. And we know that these guidelines exist as member states called for further regional collaboration to address these barriers in the hope of making their food systems and agriculture sector more resilient, efficient, and sustainable. Beyond guidelines, countries of Southeast Asia have recently proposed to the Green Climate Fund to undertake a collaborative project that builds capacities of the agri-food system to attract climate-smart investments by building science-backed business plans. This successful grant makes it one of the very first regional or multi-country and sectoral proposal to have been successfully granted. So regardless of how well these guidelines, plans, programs, and projects are designed, they will only promote responsible and climate-smart investment if we do not have a well-coordinated and openness in collaboration. Let us remember that these guidelines exist as guidelines, but there are many similar initiatives, events, partnerships that are taking place within the region, and many are already rooted in the ground. So therefore, these guidelines is the greater challenge for implementation of our guideline is really in coordination and collaborative action. Therefore, different stakeholder groups need to undertake specific actions to promote responsible and climate-smart investments in the food, agriculture, and forestry sector in ASEAN to ensure that the region's farmers, businesses, and citizens benefit from these investments. How do we do this? We have some suggestions. The ASEAN Secretariat needs to continue to facilitate and support coordination around the implementation of regional guidelines and programs on responsible and climate-smart investments at national level and work with partners who can circle back the lessons learned in parallel implementation. ASEAN member state governments need to reform domestic laws and policies to ensure that they are aligned with regional guidelines and with global principles on responsible and climate-smart investments, and thereby create an enabling environment for such investment. In doing so, they need to address sustainable development objectives and build appropriate safeguards. Businesses also need to adapt their investment practices with regional guidelines and domestic legal and policy changes. They also need to consider de-risking their agriculture portfolios take steps to implement their ESG commitments, and to make use of new types of green and sustainable financing. Civil society organizations need to continue advocacy efforts from policy to field level to ensure that ASEAN member states and investors follow regional guidelines, and that legal and policy reform governments make with respect to responsible and climate-smart investments. They also need to engage within and in consultation with governments and investors and push for inclusive processes at local levels, including the engagement of women and youth in investment processes. They also need to drive efforts to ensure local communities are aware of and are able to exercise their rights in relation to investments in FAF. Sounds a lot, right, Borj? But then we'll start with what we have right now. Right now, we have a range of partner organizations who are working with stakeholders to support efforts to play their part and their respective roles in promoting responsible and climate-smart investments in the food, agriculture, and forestry sector in ASEAN. We have right now, with financial support from the Swiss, UK, and Japanese governments, the ASEAN Secretariat, IASD, Grow Asia, and FAO are supporting the implementation of a 10-year action plan to assist ASEAN stakeholders to apply the ASEAN RAI guidelines. Through this action plan, a range of innovative tools and approaches have been developed to support governments, parliamentarians, investors, and civil society organizations to fulfill their respective roles in promoting responsible investments in the sector. Also putting words into action, the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture, the ASEAN Negotiating Group for Agriculture, together with FAO, have already moved towards addressing one of the key bottlenecks for scaling up appropriate, innovative climate-smart approaches. We are very happy that the group has secured climate finance to ensure that the agri-food sector is well equipped with sound business plans backed by climate foresight and agroecological zoning. And we are really looking forward to working with the science community, the civil society organizations, business, and investment groups in order to get this going. I also would like to add, as Dian has mentioned, several priority areas of AMAF in the upcoming years for the sector, and that decarbonization or carbon neutrality will be a sector that will specifically need special attention in investments, as farmers will probably switch to more climate-friendly approaches. So we're really looking forward to working with everyone, given this background and setting the scene. Over to you, Borj.
Thank you so much, Dada, for setting the scene for us for today's discussion. And as Dada already mentioned, different stakeholder groups can undertake specific and valuable actions to promote and attract responsible and climate smart investments in the region. So it's not just one, but should be a collaborative approach. And we are grateful to have these different stakeholder groups represented today. And our format is we'll call them on one by one, so we can highlight discussions for the specific partner or stakeholder group represented today. Now, as mentioned by both speakers earlier, the ASEAN member states are participating in an alignment assessment process to better understand how well their existing laws, policies, and institutions align with the ASEAN guidelines on promoting responsible investments in food, agriculture, and forestry, and thereby identify potential areas for reform. Now, Indonesia has had great progress so far. So let's turn to Professor Irzal Jamal of the Indonesian Center for Agricultural Socioeconomic Policy Studies, who has been involved in the alignment assessment process. Good evening, Professor Irzal.
Good evening, board.
Yes, welcome for today's session. Thanks for joining us. Now, my question for you, Professor, is could you please tell us a bit about Indonesia's experience with the alignment assessment process, and if you can include some of the challenges that you have faced so far in the implementation and the benefits you've seen so far in the process. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you already give opportunity to us to Indonesia to share our experience in assessment of Asian guideline on promoting responsible investment in food and agriculture. Indonesia conducted assessment since October 2021. In the first effort, we try to understand and define the guideline, especially a description of topic for this activity. There are 10 topics from food and nutrition security till regional approach. And after that, we try to identify the focal point internal our Ministry of Agriculture, also among the ministry that related with the issue or with the topic. For example, the topic of land tenure, for example. So in this topic, we working together with Ministry of Forest, also for the National Land Agency. After we try to identify the focal point and we discuss about this activity, we conducting self-assessment about the status of regulation and a policy measure. We do that and we conduct together, and we conduct some focal group discussion about this issue. And in the last step, we try to discuss the result about what we get that from. We try to mapping all of the regulation and also policy measure, and we make an agreement about the degree of measurement. What we conduct that, and there are some choice about the already fully alignment or partially, and also you make a score. It's really a very interesting activity among us under minister among in Indonesia. What is the challenge for this activity? The first is the first we try to give information to our friend in among the minister is the lack of understanding about this issue. So the lack of understanding of counterpart regarding with this issue. So the first effort is to make to give the understanding what is the benefit from this activity for us, for Indonesia, and also in the future what we can get this from this activity. Secondly is to how to make agreement about among us about the status, regulation, and policy measure. Some minister mentioned that it's not really alignment, but some mentioned they are already fully aligned, and also for to put the score about the status of the measurement. This is the challenge we face that. And what is the benefit we get from this activity? Through this activity, now Indonesia, we know that our position in relation with the regulation and policy in investment and on food and agriculture. We already know that what we already have a regulation, also the derivative rule in all topic of the guideline. We already know about that, and we know that what we must to do in the future to reform our regulation and to make harmonize among us for the some regulation to make the investment in agriculture and food will Indonesia will be better in the future. This is all about what your question to me. Give back to you both.
Thank you so much, Professor Rizal Jamal, for that answer. And actually, there are a couple of representatives from different ASEAN member states, governments and ministries in the call. So I encourage you to ask your questions for Professor Jamal on what the alignment assessment process has been, if and there are any specific questions, I encourage you to put that in the chat. Thanks again, Professor Jamal.
Okay, you're welcome.
All right. Now, another role, so that's one role of the government on policy alignment and processes. Another role that the government can play is the implementation of specific projects and programs that encourage responsible practices like climate smart agriculture. Now, ASEAN agriculture, as mentioned by Dada earlier in setting the scene, is transitioning towards low emissions and resilient agri-food system. And there is still that lack of financing and investments in best practices that have been identified as a major challenge. Now, to respond to this, the ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, which is Malaysia is a founding member, has taken the steps to secure financing from the Green Climate Fund in order to build capacities to attract investments and have business plans guided by climate foresight. Now we have today Muhammad Haris bin Abdul Rahman from the Malaysian Agricultural Research and Development Institute with us today. Dr. Haris?
Hi, Borch. Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, good evening. Welcome
evening.
and thanks for joining in this session today. Now, we're going to talk a bit, you're going to share a bit about this Green Climate Fund. So can you tell us more about this grant that was awarded to the ASEAN member states? And what are the member states that has been awarded with the grant? And how would this actually address that investment gap towards low emissions and resilient agri-food systems? Packed question, but over to you, Professor. And actually a bit of reminder, you'll have 5 to 6 minutes to answer. So please go ahead. Thanks so much, Dr. Haris.
Okay, thanks, Borch. First of all, thanks again for giving me the chance to speak on our experiences of being part of this newly approved GCF project. So as you mentioned, there are actually 6 countries, Laos, Malaysia, Vietnam, Philippines, Thailand, and another country. I forgot the Cambodia. Sorry, Cambodia for for the loss. Okay, it's okay. 6 countries. So basically, during the pandemics, in the past 2 years, there have been series and discussions about how we want to move forward with the ongoing discussions on Coronavia on agriculture. And at the same time, we need to do a lot of things and build investors' confidence in each country's projects and transformational climate change actions. So example is in order to build investor confidence, we need to build a solid business plans. Okay, so these business plans are guided by the climate and demand foresight. So what we did is when we streamline our GCF project with the important elements in KJWA, we leverage the national, regional, and global climate finance networks and policies to support implementation of country-specific or national climate actions. So eventually, by means of leveraging, there are a few advantages that we get. Firstly, the process itself benefits the stakeholders in terms of the recognizable process, because they might get, especially from the policies prioritized by the government. Normally, it reflects what happens at the national level to the global level. For example, as what we are progressing right now on NDCs, or even previously on CDM, for example. So another advantage is from this transformational of the policies is there will be more benefits gained from the financial plans created from this project, especially because therefore there will be private and public sector might respond positively to support eventually these comprehensive investment plans that reflects national policies. Yeah. So although the project is about creating investment plans, it is also a manifestation about the implementation of existing or new policy in place related to agriculture climate change. So that's basically my answer to your question.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Haris, for that for your answer and being on time. That's also a great news for us in the session. No, but also a great news to have some of the ASEAN member states supported by this new GCF grant, and is specifically focused on low emissions and resilient agri-food systems. Well done. Thanks for sharing with us. And as I've mentioned earlier, I noticed that there are some government representative and ministry representatives in the room today. So if you have any specific questions for both Dr. Harris and Professor Jamal, and also if anything from the earlier speakers as well, kindly put them in the chat. And I see some question and answer already ongoing. All right. Now we turn over to the private sector, which plays an essential role in agriculture investments. Now the sector is facing risk in climate change, among others. The private sector has to keep business growing and moving, and is expected to align at the same time with responsible practices, such as the Sustainable Development Goals and their own environmental, social, and governance commitments. We are joined today by two private sector partners. I'll call on our first one, Kun Haitakan Kamosir Sakul, Kun Kam, Group Chief of Staff, AVP for Strategy, Sustainability, and Innovation of Taiwan Public Company. I'll give a bit of introduction as well on Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is an agri-food company in Thailand, incorporated in 1947. So it's their 75-year this year, producing and processing tapioca products. Taiwan is operating in Vietnam, China, Cambodia, and Indonesia, and continues to explore sourcing locations in Southeast Asia. Their mission is to serve global customers while seeking ways to create innovative and sustainable farm to shelf. The company's core business is on tapioca starch and starch-related products, as well as food products and biodegradable products distributed to local and international markets. Right. Welcome, Kum Kam.
Hi, Borj, and hi, everyone.
Hi, Kam. Good evening. Thanks for joining us today. Now, I have actually a very general question for you. And if you could share with us Taiwan's experience, because I've mentioned earlier doing responsible business and also making the business work. And how is Taiwan's experience in both responsible and climate smart investments? Again, Kun Kam, just a reminder, 5 minutes, and I'll let you know when your time is up or almost up. Over to you, Kun Kam. Ha.
Thank you, Borj, and thank you everyone for having me today this evening. Just a little bit more on Taiwan, as Borj said, just to add on, yes, we do have 3 core businesses. We're 75-year-olds, and we've been expanding our portfolio not only locally in Thailand, but also internationally. So right now we're exporting to about 35 countries from our 15 operations in 5 countries here in Asia Pacific. Within that, I think one of the things that is an enabler for us and is very key to us is for us to be able to secure, create innovation and sustainability from farm to shelf. So hence, to that point, we have been building on 4 core strategic pillars for our sustainability framework. The first one is around farmer. So ensuring that our farmers, we're helping the farmers develop, and we're building regenerative agriculture. On the second core pillar is around factory. So we're building green factory and green community around where we're touching base on. The third one is around family and well-being. This is around how our associates and the community that we serve as well. And the fourth one is around food and the finished goods. I think specifically for the topic that we're talking about in terms of farm development and regenerative agriculture, if we kind of step back a little bit to the overall, linking to the overall climate change, I think, on an annual basis, food as well as agriculture emits around over 35% of the carbon emission globally. So we do feel that with us, 15 operations in 5 countries in Southeast Asia, we're able to, and we do want to help catalyze in terms of controlling and decreasing the climate impact out of the food and the agriculture sector. So under this pillar about farm development, we're, in the next 10 years, we're targeting to reduce scope 3 by 50% carbon emission reduction in agriculture. We want to improve the yield by about 20% for 100 million rice. So that's give or take close to 300,000 hectares in Southeast Asia. And we want to increase the income for our farming community by 50%. Some of the examples that we're starting, or initiatives that we're starting now since last year is, for example, working with 150,000 farmers here in Thailand to track around, the economics of the family, how do we improve the family life? What about the impact in terms of the environmental impacts? For example, helping the farmers use less chemicals that will also improve their health, but also decrease the carbon footprint as well. Another thing that we're doing, and I think this was a study that was we did together with Grow Asia last year. Taiwan is also building an organic supply chain out of Cambodia as well. The organic supply chain, which we are currently doing, is around tapioca, and we're right now exporting to sending the tapioca to our factories in Vietnam. Within that, we're working with over 10,000 farmers in Cambodia to build out the supply chain. We've started this about 3-4 years ago, and right now we're able to build quite good momentum in terms of persuading the farmers in Cambodia to plant organic. And part of the reason why we're getting more traction around that is also because organic, for farmers, they're able to get 50% more versus the normal crop, the normal tapioca crop. So, I personally went to Cambodia earlier this year and talked to the farming community that we worked with. The families had really good feedback in terms of, they're really happy that they're able to grow by planting organic with us, because that means they don't have to travel to other areas or other countries to work, because the income from the organic tapioca has actually helped them be able to have better lives as well. And I think to Taiwan, for the organic side, because we're expanding our organic plantation, which means that also we're helping the farmers use less chemical fertilizers. And at the end of the day, we're also tracking positively in terms of the carbon emission as well. So I think overall, there are a lot of initiatives that we're doing, in the public sector, and especially in Southeast Asia, in order to help improve the carbon footprint here as well, Borj. Hopefully that was 5 minutes or less.
Actually, Konkam, you're right on time.
Okay.
I wonder how you did it. It's like almost, yep. Thanks so much. I gave you, I was supposed to ask 1 minute wrap up, but then you're there. Great. Thanks for sharing Taiwan's initiative, Konkam, on both the responsible investing side, but more importantly on your goals in terms of net zero emission and a very realistic goal to reach in terms of scopes 1, 2, and 3, and the farmer support as well for the cassava production. I will put in the chat the case study that Konkam has mentioned that we did together with Taiwan in their organic cassava in Cambodia. Right. I hope that helps everyone as well. Thanks, Konkam. Khop khun kha. All right. And for those who are interested, again, I posted the link in the chat for the case study on Taiwan. All right. Now, another private sector representation for today is representing the small and medium enterprises. But I don't think that's small but big in impact. I would like to introduce Ms. Sharon Jean Gonzalez Gomatico from More Nation Agricultural Products. Evening, Ms. Sharon. I'll just give a bit of introduction about More Nation as well. Now, Nation is a Philippine company operating across multiple supply chains, focusing on value chain alignment, food systems integration, and aiding rural communities towards sustainability and self-sufficiency. The company strongly integrates social values to its business model and operations. And Nation is also a member of the United Nations Global Compact, a UN private sector mechanism, Philippine Partnership for Sustainable Agriculture, a part of the Euro-Asian Network. And Nation is also an active zero hunger champion. Now, Miss Sharon, good evening. Welcome again. I know you're a strong implementer of the ASEAN guidelines on responsible investments, as well as the CFS principles that were mentioned earlier. Now, I want to pose this question on why are these guidelines important for SMEs such as yourself, and how these investments relate to both the business side and commitment side, which is mostly focused on social, community, and environmental impact. Over to you, Ms. Sharon.
Good evening from the Philippines, esteemed colleagues. Thank you for including Nation in today's event, and thank you for the question, Borge. As a small company like Nation, the CFS ASEAN Responsible Agri-Investments, or the RISE guiding principles, have been our framework and have assisted us to where we would want to be as a company. As a global citizen, the RISE has been instrumental for us as we aligned our corporate goals with ecosystem development and the SDGs of zero hunger, no poverty, women empowerment, and climate action. The ASEAN RISE has been an important roadmap for us that we could not imagine how our path would have been otherwise, a small company investing in people, the future, and ending global hunger despite our size. When we started applying the RISE principles in our company, we also lead the people pillar of the UN Global Compact Network in the Philippines towards small business recovery and resilience. Because of the RISE, we have the courage to take on this challenge as we're confident that we will have the support of the RISE community of partners. With this, the guidelines for us have evolved and become an articulate and interactive framework that we have merged with our sustainable business model because of the RISE learning series, the case studies reporting, monitoring and evaluation tools, and the ASEAN RISE dynamic and supportive community. As you mentioned a while ago, Nation operates across multiple commodity chains, supporting the United Nations in their peace, development, and humanitarian efforts. 3 of our current initiatives have adopted the CFS ASEAN RISE guidance in operationalizing our systems. First, together with the CFS, we are a business case and part of the private sector mechanism in developing guidelines for women empowerment in the global food systems. In our company, 90% of those in our ecosystem are composed of women, and we recognize their roles and contributions in meeting our deliverables. With this, they're given an enabling environment to thrive in the areas of agriculture and trade. Women are not just in the labor-intensive farm production, but they are in all the areas of the ecosystem, from decision-making, marketing, sales, finance, sourcing, and quality management. Second is the Million Moringa movement. Our company, Nation, is named after moringa, the superfood. This movement aims to be a viable solution in fighting deforestation, hunger, and provide livelihood to the communities. The implementation of this is anchored on the RISE principles, where we plant 1 million moringa trees in each region. Nation has been developing strong linkages for moringa propagation in areas characterized by high incidences of poverty, unemployment, and unproductive lands. Despite the El Nino and typhoons, we have been consistently harvesting moringa. When Taal volcano decimated the agricultural sector surrounding it, including the area of the growers, the plants left standing and now thriving are the moringa trees. The third initiative is, despite being a small corporation, Nation is now leading the multi-stakeholder piloting of the UN Food Systems Transformation Agenda of Zero Hunger in the Philippines. The support of Grow Asia, UN, and the private sector in fighting global hunger and helping our communities grow and to scale these have been immeasurable. Working within an organization and getting the support of all members of the team to adopt the RISE is already a challenge, but with a blueprint like the RISE guidance, We use this to guide us in our operations. The importance of the RAI guidance becomes eminent when we work with various multi-stakeholders using the RAI as our main framework. Working in solidarity with others is especially important during these times for small businesses as we play on each other's strengths regardless of size and breadth. In the case of our Zero Hunger Coalition, More Nation's role is to put in the investment in the post-harvest facilities and maximizing the efficiency of our farms. Companies such as Nestle provide training support to our growers. Metro Pacific Investment Corporation and Manila Doctors Hospital provide nutrition, wellness, and health checks and interventions on our communities. ICM provides the marketing and procurement support to our harvest. Comunidad provides digitalization solutions and weather and climate advisories so that we can integrate climate smart systems in our farms. As Grow Asia's counterpart in the Philippines, PPSA conducts monitoring and evaluation of our compliance with the RAI guidelines. More so, they continually check on us and ask us what support they can provide in our initiatives. With this, PPSA is collaborating with us in the development of nutrition agriculture programs for our growers for them to be effective food champions, enabling them to be our front lines in our fight against hunger. The coalition guided by the RAI are with us on the ground, ensuring that our growers can compete in the global market, conform to global standards, and are able to connect with buyers. Through the RAI, we focus on building the capacities of the growers and the communities through trainings, mentorships, partnerships, and healthcare, as the communities sustainably manage and run their livelihoods, empowering the poorest of poor involved in the ecosystem's value chain. This also utilizes fair and sustainable trade mechanisms where the growers dictate on the prices of their harvest. In closing, responsible investing and local sourcing in the Philippines are a better option now rather than importation of goods, given the current market conditions of record-breaking trade deficits, high cost of imported goods and logistics, the valuation of the peso against the US dollar, high inflation rates, the global disruption of the supply chain. Despite these, our small company is moving forward in our climate smart and responsible investments. With the RAI and using sustainable business model, we can face and address ESG issues head on. Now is the time to invest, source local, empower women, provide stability in their livelihoods. Because the issues like poverty, hunger, and unjust food systems continue to persist and will not disappear by inaction. The CFS FAO Say and RAI guidance continues to be a beacon in these stormy seas. With the RAI initiatives, it becomes more just and inclusive. Once it reaches critical mass, social, economic, environmental action impact is reached. Thank you. Over to you, Borge.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much, Ms. Sharon, for sharing the initiatives and work of More Nation. As we always say, SME is a backbone of the economy, and you're clearly
99% of our companies in the Philippines are composed of SMEs.
that is true and correct. And we see that this the efforts to align to certain guidelines and initiatives could build within a business model as well, as Ms. Sharon mentioned. Thank you so much, Ms. Sharon, for sharing about More Nation and about your work and lots of initiative around responsible agriculture investing. Thank you so much. All right, and I'll pause for a minute to ask if anyone keep the questions going on the chat. We're compiling it, and some of our colleagues are actually also answering the questions as well. So if you have any questions from for both Kunkam and Ms. Sharon, post it in the chat as well. So hopefully we can get through that to the Q&A later on. Now, we cannot and we should not forget actually that there is one critical role in promoting responsible and climate smart investment that the civil society plays. Now, the panel deliberately ends with an intervention from the civil society, in addition to its key role in advocating for and raising awareness about responsible agricultural investment. It must be meaningful to engage in the work described by the government and the private sectors, whether in policy review processes, consultations, or actual investments on the ground. I would like to invite Mags Katindig. Good evening, Mags. Assistant Secretary General of AsiaDRAW. AsiaDRAW, or the Asian Partnership for the Development of Human Resources in Rural Areas. AsiaDRAW is a regional partnership of 11 social development networks and organizations in 11 Asian nations that envisions Asian rural communities that are just, free, prosperous, living in peace, and working in solidarity towards self-reliance. AsiaDRAW is an affiliate entity of the ASEAN and also part of the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism, or the CSIPM, for relations with the CFS, which is the largest international space for CSOs working to eradicate food insecurity and malnutrition. Right. Hi, Mags. Good evening to you. Great.
Thank you, Borge, and thank you for pointing out that the implementation and discussion on responsible agri investment cannot happen without the participation of civil society organizations. So thank you, Borge, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from Manila. From AsiaDRA's experiences, we are a network of rural development NGOs, and from our network's experience, as well as from the other CSOs initiatives that we know of or participated in, there are three important contributions that we have been doing. One is capacity development, the other is case documentation and studies, and very important, the popularization and localization to implement the ASEAN RAI. Beyond campaigns and advocacy, as Dada mentioned earlier, AsiaDRA believes that meaningful realization of these important guidelines, agreements, commitments, and policy instruments, however we call it, will only be achieved if strategic actions reach on ground and if it includes multi-stakeholder participation, especially of the rural communities. We recognize, though, that there is a need to capacitate our ranks, especially in constructive engagement or in partnership building with the public and private sectors, among many things. Since 2019, AsiaDRA, in collaboration with the FAO, we have been investing in developing capacities of CSOs, farmers organizations, and select government agencies in Cambodia, Lao PDR, Myanmar, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam, especially in promoting youth and women's role in climate resilient and responsible agri-investments. These include capacity assessment workshops, training of trainers, learning sessions, among others. Several CSOs in the region, most of which are partners of AsiaDRA, have also been conducting many awareness raising and capacity development among CSOs, FOs, and national government agencies. Along with these capacity building activities, AsiaDRA has also invested in case documentation and scoping studies on rural youth and women's participation in agriculture investments. In 2018 to 2019, we did a regional scoping study on ensuring climate resilience of rural communities in Asia, which included a proposal for a community resilience rights framework. Though through this case documentation and scoping studies, which are all available on our website, by the way, through these studies, we have noted that several global and regional policy instruments, such as the ASEAN RAI guidelines, are not yet well known at the national and subnational level. So we still have a lot of work to do in promoting these important policy instruments. We have also mapped out several national and local initiatives or public programs on focusing on youth and rural women in agriculture. We found out that many of these initiatives still need integration of the CNRI guidelines in their implementations. So we have also organized multi-stakeholder dialogues and consultation workshops with private sector, with public sectors, workshops on responsible and climate resilient investments, particularly focusing on empowering rural women and youth. All this capacity development, case documentation, popularization, and local activities have helped the participants internalize RAI principles and embed them in their work, particularly in their engagement with their respective governments, in the economic activities of the FOs or the farmers organizations, and in lobbying and advocacy. As an example, Borge, at the regional level, ASEAN was able to embed these RAI guidelines and strategies in the ASEAN Rural Development and Poverty Eradication Framework Action Plan for 2021 to 2025, and in the draft ASEAN Rural Development Master Plan, where ASEAN co-anchored the development processes with the ASEAN Secretariat. At the national level, some examples, some CSOs that we have trained were able to use their knowledge of RAI in contributing to consultation processes of their country's agriculture development plans and proposed laws. For instance, in the Philippines, in the drafting of the Magna Carta for young farmers, and also in the review of existing national policies, such as in Cambodia, the review of the contract farming law. So the capacity development activities have improved the skills and confidence of CSOs, especially of farmers organization, in presenting their positions when dealing or negotiating with the public and private sectors. We were also able to help popularize the ASEAN RAI principles among private sectors. For instance, in a workshop in Cambodia, a private sector representative inquired about the difference of the ASEAN RAI guidelines with the other many existing framework policies and laws. So our colleague in Cambodia, who is now a certified RAI trainer, was able to help clarify and explain further the important role of different stakeholders in implementing RAI. It is important that these different sectors it is important that we have the same appreciation or understanding of these important policies and frameworks or principles. So, Borge, there are more things that I can share beyond campaigns and advocacy, but the three concrete contributions, the capacity development, case studies or documentations, and the popularization and localization are some of the concrete contributions that CSOs are doing or contributing in relation to ASEAN RAI implementation at different levels, not only at the regional and national level, but especially at the local level. Over to you, Borge.
Well done on time as well. Thank you so much, Max. I'm so happy for all of our panelists today are doing great on time. It's very rare to moderate this kind of panel, but well done. And thank you, Max, for tying up initiatives from the government, the private sector, and the important role of the civil society organization in actually pushing forward some of these activities as well. And great that you mentioned some of the initiatives that were recognized by all of the partners in the region as well. We have Cambodia. Some of our partners are also in the room today, and some in the Philippines as well. So great to have that representation and concrete examples on the field. All right. Well done. Now I want to, we have a few minutes to open up for a question and answer. We might not be able to go through all of them. I've noticed that some of the questions were already answered by some of our colleagues. But if anyone wants to raise their hands and actually ask the question, you may do so. You have some time to do that. So I'll give everyone a minute or two to raise their hand while I'm checking as well some of the questions you posted on the chat. Or those who have posted it on the chat, you might want to ask it live directly to the panelists. That's okay as well. We welcome questions on the floor. All right. We have a shy group today, so I think I would just post the questions that were in the chat. Hopefully one for each panelist, but if not, then we'll move through. I have one question, I think, specifically for Professor Jamal, in terms of, I don't know if you have answered this, but would you like to give some of the ministerial representatives today the next steps for the Indonesian government after the self-assessment? And would it possibly include other stakeholders as well? Over to you, Professor Jamal.
Okay, thank you, Bert. For the next step for the Indonesia, we try to identify all of the results from the first assessment, and we try to see that the higher gap, what is already in alignment, and what is still not alignment, and we try to see that for the detail of regulation and policy, and we make a priority to reform for in the future. Is the first we do that. Secondly, we try to identify the investment risk of the Indonesia. Based on this assessment, we know that what is the investment risk of the Indonesia, and try to what our mitigation process for that. And lastly, we try to appoint one of the institution to responsibility for the investment in under Ministry of Agriculture. Board.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Jamal. That was very helpful for the next steps. And I think that's a mostly multi-stakeholder approach as well for that self-assessment. So if anyone on the ministries are also working on the alignment assessment tool, post your questions as well. And the contact information will be shared as well after at the closing end. Thank you. And I think I'll also ask one question here, both for the private sector. Kung Kam and Ms. Sharon, either of you can answer. This is actually a really good question on what are the biggest risks and opportunities for your business with respect to climate smart investment? Don't go at the same time, so I'll probably call out Kam first because you're first on my screen.
Okay.
in a minute, like a minute or two, if that's possible.
Sure. Okay, so I go first, or Sharon, would you like to? Okay. I think an opportunity, well, we see it as more of an opportunity. I think, we've started our sustainability journey quite many years ago. And now we're starting to gain sort of momentum with it. We export to 35 countries. We do believe that we're impacting about 1 million customers globally right now. And we're seeing more traction in terms of customer inquiries about sustainability and carbon footprint declarations and things like that. The thing is, what was interesting to me is we're not only seeing these questions from US or Europe, but we're starting to see more from companies within Asia. So within Thailand itself, actually from Philippines as well. Some of our customers in Philippines are asking about it. So I think, that also has prompted us to sort of kind of validate that we're on the right track in terms of climate smart investing in a farming community to help improve sustainable farming on that front as well. So I see it more of an opportunity.
Thank you so much, Kang Ham. And Sharon?
I think that's a very good question. The risks and opportunities in investing in climate smart agriculture. One of the investments that we're into right now is the use of organic fertilizers for our growers, because around 70% of our growers are organic farmers. So we have to use organic fertilizers for them. And one of the risks of using organic fertilizers is what happened in Sri Lanka. Because the use of the organic, they were pushing for organic fertilization of all their crops, but the harvest hectarage per yield was lessened, so it did not really help the farmers in the trading of their goods and the harvests. But what we would want to do is also make use of that, especially now that this is an opportunity for a lot of those who are interested in climate smart agriculture, is investing in organic, locally sourced organic fertilizers in their countries. So what we're doing right now is from the food wastage from our farmers, we're trying to compost that, and then from there, a lot of the crops that could not be absorbed by the market, they can be turned to compost. And one of the president of PPSA, Ami, also suggested using sludge from water dams to also use as fertilizers for this kind of so those are some of the solutions that we're looking into when we look into the risks and opportunities of using organic fertilizers for our climate smart investments portfolio.
Thanks so much, Sharon. I think there are a lot of good keywords from both Cam and Sharon in terms of with respect to climate smart investments. I think in totality, there's a certain notion of circularity as well in the business model to see it as an opportunity. And yeah, great. Awesome. We have a couple more minutes to close this session. So for those who have answered questions on the chat, don't worry, we've taken that all in. And sorry, I think I have one hand raised from Max. Yes, Max, go ahead.
Yes, Borja, I saw a question from Luis or Loy. And in addition to the responses of Dada and Emma of FAO, I just want to also point out 6 important points moving forward from the CSO perspective. One is the need for a continued awareness raising on these important guidelines, such as the ASEAN RAI guidelines, especially at the local level, at the among the rural communities and among the local governments. The next one is to contribute or participate to advancing, reviewing, or amending national policies and programs that are supportive of RAI or that supports RAI. So, and the third is to continue engaging multi-stakeholders, especially for us CSOs, to engage public and private sectors. We should be able to maximize existing engagement mechanisms, multi-stakeholder mechanisms at the country level. There are several existing mechanisms at the ASEAN member states. We should be able to maximize those. Next is we also recommend expanding the existing global and regional discourses. We have this regular global and regional forum or these workshops, consultations on RAI, and we need to expand these discourses as a regular multi-stakeholder mechanisms for us to share and exchange models, policies, and programs on responsible agri-investment. But more importantly, we need to ensure that the discussions and agreements made in these global and regional mechanisms have concrete tractions on the ground. And lastly, we propose to have mechanisms at the local levels, at the ASEAN member states level, mechanisms for promoting or monitoring or social accountability on ASEAN guidelines on RAI implementation. So that would be all, Borj.
Thanks so much, Max, for that. And I think that's actually a good close for the Q&A part or the open forum part of this session. Thank you all so much for your questions and for our panelists. Now, before we close, I'll pass it to Dada again to give us a closing remarks and to have some of the key messages we've gathered from this session today. Thank you. And over to you, Dada.
Thank you very much, Borj. And it's been a very exciting conversation, right? I think we have a lot of participants as well, and the chat box has been full of questions and discussions, and I was turning philosophical in some of the answers. But I would like to mention some key takeaways that really struck me most. Professor Jamal's sharing really points towards the importance of building enabling environments for investments. He mentioned land tenure, security of tenure, which is really part of the risking investments. Dr. Harris from Malaysia really mentioned the GCF proposal. Really, we're very proud of it as one of the first successful regional one. And it's going to work towards science-backed business plans. So in order to attract these investments, we really need to be guided by climate foresight, and not just climate foresight, demand foresight as impacted by climate impacts. And the sharing from Kunkam really struck me the most, especially when we're looking at impacts at scale. The role of the private sector in order to magnify impacts is very, very important here, and we really need to consider that. And the role of Morination really also exemplifies the importance of small scale and grassroots farmers. These are the frontliners who are facing the impacts of unsustainable practices and the impacts of climate change. And therefore, I see them as innovators, because frontliners will definitely be the one coming up with innovation. From Mags from Asia Dra, you know, Mags, what really struck me from all of Asia Dra's sharing is always the message from Marlene that says, and what you have echoed today, which is that farmers implementing policies versus crafted for them versus farmers implementing policies crafted by them. And I think with your continuous call for inclusivity, this should be reflected in terms of attracting the right, responsible, and climate smart investments. So circling back to the guidelines, and I know I have some script here to really mention, the guideline, the formulation of any guideline, having worked with ASEAN for 10 years now, is some sort of like a fairy tale story with lots of bureaucratic nightmare, right? The formulation or the adoption of a guideline, the existence of a guideline, is just the first step. But even if it's the first step, there's a lot of efforts that went behind it. So many stakeholders have been involved, so much funds as well. Technical expertise have been tapped. And for me, the best guideline for the region is that, after working with ASEAN for 10 years, is the one that really reflects best practices and that are able to bring diverse range of players and stakeholders together. And we are seeing this now, but there's more to do. Okay, now I'm gonna stick to my script. Each stakeholders that we've seen today, governments, investors, civil society organizations, we all know that there's important roles to play. And in playing these roles, being supported with innovative tools, approaches, and projects to assist governments to create enabling legal and policy frameworks to attract the kind of investment that we're all talking about today, right? Which is responsible and climate smart investments. And these guidelines play this role. But beyond this also, I would like to go back to a message that I wrote on the chat box, is that the larger task is really collaboration and coordination and connecting all the dots. A guideline, I think, is a summary of best practices, existing initiatives, compelling us to rise above what we are having right now and to jointly move together. So the call really for us is to connect all the dots and have all the innovators, the science people, the CSOs to all work together. So without taking so much more time, I would like to invite the audience to please, all participants, to please get in touch with us, all the stakeholders that are here and the organizers. to learn more about the various initiatives discussed. I think this is a group of people that have come together and shown a big propensity for collaboration. So with that, Porge, I would like to end my summary of key takeaways and thank all the participants for actively listening and being with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Dada, for that inspirational message. I think we all will take that with us and move along the multi-stakeholder approaches for responsible investments and climate smart investments in the region, and hoping to work with more of you. Some of you are working together now, but more hands together and collaboration is the last I think the key takeaway for this session. Thanks so much, Dada, and thanks everyone for joining us. We're a bit over time, but we'd like to thank you all for joining us in this session. And there are other sessions in CFS side events as well ongoing, so you can join that as well. On behalf of the ASEAN Secretariat, Grow Asia, International Institute for Sustainable Development, GACSA, ASEAN Climate Resilience Network, we'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Thanks so much. Good night, good afternoon, and have a great week ahead. Thank you so much.